What is up, everybody? I am your host, Jaso. Welcome everyone to the God Mode channel. A huge thank you to Planet and Mike and for the follows. I really appreciate that. I'm so happy to have you all here. Thank you, Hooligan, for stopping by as well. Welcome to the God Mode channel. Hey, Discordian. Thank you all for coming to hang out with me tonight. We are going to be chatting with Chris from Carnisideshow, but before we jump over there, I wanted to do a quick couple announcements on my end just to give me a quick little precursor. This is largely a ttrpg/RPG channel here at the God Mode channel. We're in between campaigns. Our premiere content on the stream, I like to consider it to be our Friday night D&D campaigns, but we're in between those sessions. I'm trying to get some commissioned art and stuff done. I like the production values to be high, so going to be a little bit longer. Expect July-ish for our next campaign. You can kind of see the details and stuff down below on the About section. But make sure and go give Carnisideshow's channel a follow. Go support them and give them some love because I'm going to be chatting with him a little bit later. Really quickly, if you have not already, if you enjoy the content here on the channel, if you want to support it, make sure and go follow my links. I just slapped those in the chat. The Twitter, obviously the Twitch here. I'm very close to 475 followers. That'd be amazing to hit that milestone. I got a Patreon, all kinds of really cool behind the scenes content over there on the Patreon. All kinds of good links and stuff for you to follow. Also, if you're interested, I am trying to get into the professional world of dungeon mastering. I have a Tuesday and Thursday evening game, so if you're interested, if you want to have a committed and consistent dungeon master with the same type of quality and immersion you can expect from any of our other streams that you can see on the VODs here or anything else, make sure and go check out my startplaying.games page. I'm actually kicking off one of those games next Tuesday evening, and that's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So if you have availability there are still 2 seats open. You can jump in before we start our session 0 next week. Otherwise, you could always join the Thursday evening. That needs a couple seats filled as well. So make sure and go check that out. I'd love it and appreciate it. Anyone who's interested, thank you. So let me go ahead, and now that I'm done with my spiel, I just wanted to quickly give that a shout out. I'm going to switch over here to our God Mode HQ and check it out over here. Hang on just a second.
My camera just went out.
Oh no. Uh-oh. Oh no. Hey, we technical difficulties. Hang on just a second. Thank you for stopping by, Anna. I appreciate that. Anna, not Koozie too this time. Interesting. There we go.
There we go.
What is up? This is Chris from Carnisideshow. Make sure and go follow their Twitch channel. They are, I guess you just say a D&D or ttrpg streamer. What should be the preferred one?
For now we're just D&D.
Okay.
We've done some other games, but yeah.
I'll pick your brain about that. Yeah, we I keep telling my guests, those of you who've been on any of the other DM on DM sessions have seen me. It's just my hour and a half to snag some of the people in the ttrpg community who I may have chatted with just over the period of being a member myself, that I get a chance to just sit down with them and have some fun and just have a chat. So I was able to wrangle Chris. I can't believe he accepted considering the difference in time. So thank you so much. Where are you based out of again, Chris?
Yeah, so we're actually in Taiwan here.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's about, hold on, you're on the East Coast. We're 12 hours difference right now.
It is actually a straight 12-hour difference. It is wild. One of the experiences of being on Twitch, Chris, that I don't know if you've noticed this yourself, is the fun of the difference in people from all over the world. It's really kind of cool to have like a international audience.
Yeah, it's actually one of the best parts, to be honest. And being over here too, it's really cool because we've been kind of, pretty deep within the Australian community of
really
players.
I guess,
and it's we've met some really good people there.
Those two time zones, do they kind of sync up for you?
You mean Australia and which one?
And yours. I'm an American, so map wise I'm a dummy.
Yeah, no, so we're exactly the same as Perth, which is the western side of Australia.
Okay.
About 3 hours behind Sydney, but it syncs up pretty well. There's a little bit of conflict because we have one game that we played where like one of the players was in Seattle and then the other two were in like Perth area.
Whoa.
And we were in Taiwan. So yeah, but it's because we're kind of in the middle, we can make it work out just a little bit.
It's wild. Hey, what's up, Mousy? Thank you everyone for joining us. Before I dive into picking your brain about some of that stuff, Chris, do you want to just give me like a rundown of your Twitch channel and what you do over there and what that's all about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we are a D&D channel, actual play.
If there's anything else to add other than what I was talking about, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's mostly it. We used to do more interviews of like kind of like this, similar to this. Sylvie, my wife, and also a player, ran a bunch of like game shows / interviews with some people. We had some pretty fun guests on there.
They were
She had,
super
like,
fun to watch. I was like,
Yeah.
mine is just a poor man's version. There's no pajama fun party here, but I loved watching them. They're super fun. You did a great
they were
job doing
great.
those.
Yeah, so she had some fun guests on there, and but right now we're currently just playing D&D, which is great.
Nice. Hey, that works. I love watching more D&D. What's your one game a week? When's that run?
So actually, we finally brought back 2 games. I forgot to say. So we have like our first game, our main campaign game that's been going on for almost a year now is a group called Misty Steps, and that is on Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. East Coast. And
Nice.
the other game is actually Tuesday morning for you guys. So it's a Tuesday night in Taiwan. Yeah, that one starts at what time? 9:30 a.m. Yeah.
So I've always known whenever I want to go check out your channel, Chris, at least, from what I remember trying to keep up, I knew you did like a good handful of different like D&D games. So I'm curious, when you say that you actually have a longer running campaign, can you give me some details about what that's about? Like how's the story been going? What's the basic premise of that?
Yeah, that one's really fun. So we had 2 others, and then we've finally, one of them actually concluded, which was good. One of them we had to, because it was based in Taiwan, just the time was just weird, and it was on Saturday, so we had to cancel that one, unfortunately. But yeah, this one, Misty Steps, it was based in the Domains of Dread, and then just because the actual lore from D&D, and also the way that they played it, we ended up going to a little bit of the Witchlight Carnival.
Is Domains of Dread, is that Ravenloft area?
That is Ravenloft. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Nice.
And now they're back. They're back in Ravenloft after doing a bunch of things and finding a bunch of secrets. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I checked out some of that Witchlight content, and that seems really cool and kind of unique for like a D&D adventure. It seems really neat.
Yeah, it was fun to get in there, and it was perfect because the way that it was set up, even before I knew that the whole story of the Witchlight stuff, it worked out perfectly. So
awesome. I'm interested. I know we talk about sort of like an international audience. So you said your cast is somewhat international as well.
For this game, they're mostly all in America. One of them's in Canada, but yeah, North.
I'm interested because what is if and I don't know, so I'm curious to see, based in Taiwan, like, is there a following for Dungeons and Dragons? Is there a culture for it there?
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure. It's really interesting. I met people who are in different areas who like the temperature for at least Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know about tabletop RPGs, but like Dungeons and Dragons, sometimes it's like great, sometimes it's like people don't really care about it. So
yeah, there's so we're lucky to find like the only expats here that the best expats, I should say, that can play D&D. We've been in groups here. They're not super fun necessarily. We're super lucky to have found yeah.
Oh man, that sucks. Well, that's
it's a thing. But we found Michelle from Phoenix Dice, who is super awesome.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay.
Amanda, that's the Tuesday night crew here. So
awesome.
We just do ridiculous one shots. Right now we're playing one where it's called the No One Expects the Thranish Inquisition, and they're playing as a bunch of Inquisitors. lawful evil. So.
Your thumbnails for any of these things for your one shots and stuff that you do are so hilarious. I love seeing what new images come out with just the players' faces slapped on to whatever new kind of kooky thing you have going. It's a lot of fun to see. Let's see. So, man, that's really interesting. So, well, that's the beauty of the internet, right? Is now we can connect with, you know, I don't know, I don't want to guess anybody's age range, but I know, like me growing up in school, I'm mid 30s to late 30s now, and I know that before the internet became big, like it would have been impossible to really, unless you kind of got lucky to find that special group, there was really no way to connect to find that D&D group. And as me being like a super introvert, it would have been impossible to really find a stable group. So I'm so thankful that the internet exists now to like be able to connect people for stuff like this.
Yeah, for sure. We were super lucky with all the people we found so far. I mean, yeah. I have some issues with playing online. Like it's just not the same, you know. But
I was gonna ask, are you partial to the just kind of in person sit down at a table and play, or do you enjoy the online? What's your favorite?
No, I like in person. Like I like online can be fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially it depends on the players, of course. But
oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess it would depend on sort of the group that you have too. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I guess in person as well. It also depends on. It always depends on the players and the DM.
Yeah.
But in person is like everybody is on the same page. You know, everybody has the vibe. So like if you're playing something spooky, everybody's kind of like, you know, they're a little bit, you know, they feel it. Everybody hears the music. Everybody's at the same time. Like you guys are in sync. Online it's harder. Like people are easier to check out. Some people like they don't put on Sirenscape, so they don't hear the music, or they're just like, you know what I mean? Like somebody like maybe something's going on in the background. They're not really in the vibe. So it's not as immersive as an experience for me, and that's most important for me. That's what I like the most. So.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that. I think there's pros and cons in person and online. I know for me online, one of my big things, and I try to catch myself, and sometimes I still do it, is it's hard to sort of like, I try to keep visibility on everyone's, you know, face while I'm chatting, especially when we're playing D&D, but it's so hard not to sometimes try to find that space to like get in and talk without stepping on people's toes. I find myself really like guilty of accidentally sometimes talking over people, so it's kind of tough sometimes doing that. So I do like in-persons. I do enjoy the virtual nature of me being an introvert. I can kind of sit in some boxers or pajamas at home and kind of, you know, not have that social pressure of being in person to do it. But like you said, then you also sort of miss the what do you want to call it? The jovial nature or the camaraderie of like being in person with those other people to kind of laugh together and stuff. There's just sort of like a little disconnect, even if you're looking at each other on like a webcam versus just being in person, sitting down together. Like I can see that. How long have you been doing? Have you been a DM?
Not that long actually. Maybe 4 years now.
Okay.
4 or 5.
That's not too different from my experiences. Did you start by being a dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragons?
I did, yeah. That was the first thing we jumped into.
Cool.
Actually, yeah, as a dungeon master. Yeah.
Were you a player first or a dungeon master first?
Dungeon master first.
Whoa! That's cool.
Yeah. We had played a couple of others, like what was it, Fiasco, and some of those really short and fun games as players, and definitely different. And yeah, just before that, I had zero interest, or I guess knowledge about TTRPGs in general.
Nice. Was there like a particular person that got you into them?
I'm trying to think.
Because I found like most people that I know got pulled in by either like a family member or a relative or a good friend or something. But I know some people also discover it just like out of pure curiosity themselves. So yeah,
I'm trying to think why. There was a reason. There was a reason. Though the thing that I mean, the group that got me into it, typical is like Critical Role.
Oh,
Of course.
okay,
And like,
okay.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember why I searched them out. I'm trying to. There was one person I met here who was like he was new to Taiwan, and we had just gotten into a chat about playing games or something like that. I think that's what it was.
Mhm.
And he had mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool actually. And the reason I was kind of like turned off of Dungeons and Dragons beforehand is because I had friends that played it in high school, and
Yeah.
I mean I visited the shop where he worked and all that kind of stuff, and it was kind of like I'm still introverted, and I was still a pretty big nerd. Even back then I was a super big nerd, but like
Same.
not that kind of nerd. Not like they're the ones that played they're the ones that played Magic, and I hate to say it, but they're all pretty, non-diverse, and also just kind of like the people that kind of bicker back and forth, like it's like a competition of I know more about this nerddom than you do kind of thing. They were
Yeah.
definitely that. So I was like, man, I like hanging out with you guys, but I'm not going to sit down for like 4 hours to deal with kind of like this. You know what I mean?
I've made a lot of I made a lot of diverse friends in both the Magic space and the ttrpg space, but I feel where you're coming from, because that was maybe to some degree similar to my experiences when I was growing up through high school and early college. I found that clique of people who mostly played the Magic the Gathering cards, but it was that unfortunate toxic side of the fans who had that
Exactly.
sort of gatekeeping elitist attitude that was very off-putting to me. So I loved the game, but I felt like, man, I can't find the right group of people because these people just seem not fun to play with. And even my D&D experiences, I started out as a player, but my first DM he was the living example of many of the rules that people try to do these advice YouTube videos of how not to run a game. He had like a DM NPC, that type of player.
Oh wow.
Or that type of DM, and it was not a great experience, but luckily at that time I had people playing with me who, despite having not a great DM, they were enjoyable other players to play with, and that's what kind of kept me interested in it for some degree. I kind of went through the same phase you did, where I'm like, that's just a little step too far. Like I eventually got out of college and moved in with a roommate, and they would play D&D out in the living room, and he said, oh, you're invited, come play with us. And I was just like, it's a little too far for me. But over the weeks, it was funny. It was kind of like an osmosis thing. I kept hearing them laughing and having fun out at the table, and I just thought at some point, I'm like, you know what, screw it, why not? I do goofy voices and am a strange person anyway, so I'll just go play D&D. And I haven't really stopped. That was 10-12 years ago.
That's great. That's cool. That's really cool.
But
yeah, and the thing is, like, I do play Magic all the time. It's just the way I got into it, finally, like, really got into it, is because it's online, and it's the same thing for like RPGs. Like,
do you play Arena a lot?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, yo, cool.
Way
All
too
right.
much, way too much.
It's a great app, isn't it? It's really cool. It's
So
easy to use.
yeah.
It's so nice that it's like the fully fleshed out Magic instead of, some version of it. I remember, like, did you ever play Yu-Gi-Oh?
I tried it. Yeah, I played Pokemon a bit. And,
Yeah, I remember enjoying Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit, not like too deep into it, but I remember a couple games would come out way back on, like, I don't know, I'm old, the PlayStation 1, and they were fun to play, but they were never the full translation of the game into, the video game form. And so it's cool to finally play Magic and be like, wow, this is just playing Magic, but I can do it at the ease of myself. I don't have to worry about, like, kind of running into anybody toxic, because you don't really talk while you're playing the app. So yeah, it's super, super fun and easy.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I like it, I mean, it's just like any video game. Like, I like the story part of it. I like the idea. I really love the idea of mechanics and being able to figure out rules and like how to do stuff. I don't like tracking it. I don't. I just don't like it. And it's the same with D&D. So because of D&D 5e and because Critical Role, I saw like, oh, this could be a story storytelling game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like a competition game, like where you min max numbers and stuff like that. It's like you actually have like depth, and people like approach certain ideas and talk about it with feeling and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow,
Like
now
a
that's cool.
real narrative behind it. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, that's really cool. And I've always, if anything, I've always been like a super big fantasy book novel nerd more than anything else. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask. So you've played more than just D&D in terms of kind of like tabletop RPGs.
Oh yeah, I love them all. They're pretty good.
Do you have a favorite child, or or all of them your favorites?
I always go back to D&D, so I guess it still has to be D&D. I think it's just the way 5e is set up. It has enough rules that you know exactly what you expect, but also has the freedom to just kind of bend whatever you want to do.
It's a hard habit to kick.
It is. I really enjoy. We're currently playing Monster of the Week, and
everyone keeps telling me about that one. I need to play it sometime. I hear it's
fun.
good.
It's really fun. I love dark themes anyway, so Call of Cthulhu, like whenever I can get a chance to run one of those games, I absolutely love it.
Yes. Funnily enough, before I was a player for D&D for many years. It was really one of my friends who was actually on the stream with us. His campaign that was not really like streamed or anything. We just played it over, what was it? Not Discord, but whatever was before that. Probably just through maybe Roll20's like video feature. And it was his campaign that really sort of drove me to eventually want to become a D&D or like dungeon master. But before I did, I DM'd a game of Call of Cthulhu. That was like the first actual TTRPG that I was I guess you call GM for. And I'm the same as you. I find myself like, obviously it's the bread and butter for this channel here, but there's just something attracting to the narrative and system of D&D. But system-wise, man, I really did love Call of Cthulhu, only because I would never call it rules light, but it was less rules heavy than Dungeons and Dragons, and allowed like kind of what you're talking about, where the narrative was much more of a sort of big central thematic point of the game versus the actual mechanics, which is really cool. The mechanics were actually built. They have that push mechanic in 7th edition that actually helps engage the story. That's actually really neat. So you should definitely try it out. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
But
great.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that brings me to want to ask you about. So for you as a DM GM, D&D has the 3 sort of big pillars: the exploration, roleplay, and combat. I guess, would you say that you lean more towards roleplay than the 2 others?
For sure. Yeah. Roleplay is definitely the big one. For me personally, if I'm a player, exploration is more important to me.
Oh,
like, I wanna
really?
be able
Okay.
I want to dive deep. Like I said, immersion is like huge. And I guess that's why roleplay too, but just immersion in general. I would actually change the 3 pillars. But
Well, you mean like actually switch one of them up for something else?
just rename them maybe, because I feel like roleplay and exploration are kind of, to be honest, like if you're, well, for me if you combine them, it's more about the immersion of it. So like being the character in the story, and like exploration leads to discovering new things about the world, which is again like more immersive than anything else.
Oh yeah,
The
that's
combat
true.
would keep separate, but I feel like combat I would rename to not combat, but more like encounters in general, because there can be stuff that's not combat that still requires, like, it can be dangerous and it can still require initiative counts,
That's
like
true.
chases or like a timed event,
Yeah.
traps, stuff like that.
Environmental hazards. Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
I've found myself gravitating towards that. Do you try to do you find that obviously D&D is built to have those 3 pillars in mind, and obviously a large part of that is combat, and I feel as the additions of D&D have drawn on that the threat of death has maybe lessened, or it's just a little more difficult to really see real threat towards a player's character death? Do you find it's kind of more difficult to the narrative because of that?
Not necessarily. I feel like there's always the chance of death. In fact, we had a player die, but again, to what you said, because it's 5th edition, like there's just too many ways to bring him back anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I have that, and I say this just because I have, that's sort of my issues. I kind of want my games to have. I don't want it to be Call of Cthulhu level, because that's sort of like, don't fight the monsters, you'll die. But
right.
You kind of want it to be. You want it to be a little dangerous for your players. I want them to be a little engaged, not actually scared, but it's kind of fun for you to be like, oh man, my character could face some real danger here. I think there's fun in that, and I think sometimes it's hard to hit that level with Dungeons and Dragons.
I think the biggest problem actually comes from so this is the biggest example I have. So the group here in Taiwan, like, they play a game usually on their own where their characters, they've been playing for like 3 years or whatever. They have the same characters, like they've never died, and they don't want to die, and they really care about their characters. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other side where, like, the group with Misty Steps, like, they play D&D enough to know that maybe like some DMs will overcompensate and kill off their characters often.
Right,
especially
right.
at lower levels, right, when they can't be brought back. And so they don't care about their characters. So for me, like, I'm trying to create tension, I'm trying to create a story, and they're like, yeah, I know what happens, it's fine if he dies. And I'm just like, no, that's not okay. You're supposed to care.
Right.
But so it's harder for me in that regard, I suppose.
Yeah. I've faced the same thing. Thank you so much for the raid, Black Rose. I really appreciate that. Hello, everyone. We're in the middle of talking with Chris from Carnisideshow. Make sure to go check out their channel. They do a fantastic job, and I always love checking out their content. Yeah, that's. I actually tried to. Have you ever? I know for me. So, I guess you would probably say you gear your. Let's not even call them pillars. Your big thing is immersion, which I really enjoy. Are there like special, as a dungeon master, are there special ways that you try to implement that immersion into your games? Anything that you would maybe think is kind of unique among yourself and how you do it? Or just good tips, like in terms of trying and engage your players that you have with you.
I don't know. I think one thing I just kind of do is I feel like some DMs feel like they need to step in to a scene a lot of the time, and it's true, there's points where you need to keep it going, especially for a stream, but I tend to sit back and just like watch the players kind of like do their thing.
Watch them struggle.
Sometimes, because not struggle, I mean, if they're like in a conversation, if they're in a conversation or something, like, or if they're like feeling something out as their characters, like, yeah, totally, like, just like I enjoy that. That's part of my favorite thing about it, is watching like their stories kind of unfold. And I think that's one thing that helps. I've played with a lot of GMs that are like, okay, we got to hit this, and this today, and if we don't do that, then I failed as a GM, kind of a thing. And it's like, why don't you just like let us chill for a bit and see what happens, or go with what one of the players wants to do. Like, one experience, like if you're gonna have your players write up backstories, then you should probably read them.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Because I've had a GM where I was just like, I wrote up a backstory. It wasn't even long. It was like 2 paragraphs. It wasn't huge. And I was just like, this is what his goals are or whatever. And we were playing a module, and he's like, okay. Didn't even read it. I could tell, because like when it came time to state the objectives and what we needed to do, like he didn't factor anything in, right? He just expects my character to be like okay with it, which as a player, like, I'm like, yeah, fine, okay, I'll go along with the story. But as the character, I was kind of like, okay, this is kind of unfulfilling. Like, this isn't, if I was actually playing the character, he wouldn't want to do this. This doesn't make sense the way you set it up.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. I tend to have players make their backstories and then integrate it into the main story.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Even if it's a module, like somehow tie it in. Even if it's cheesy, even if it's like a cheat to like get the story together.
It helps tie their own immersion in for the character they're playing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Worry Warlord says, how does a DM introduce new players the best way?
Yeah, for that one, okay, for me personally, I feel like some of the players at least should know each other. They should come in as a group of some sort to kind of like get over that like initial meeting, get over also that like a little bit like standoffishness that some players or characters will have.
You think a
You know what I
session
mean?
0 is good at sort of maybe building that sort of communication between each other? Or do you mean like actually sort of knowing them in sort of a play session or two?
Well, we do the session 0 way before, kind of like way before the campaign. So it's
Oh,
where I
okay.
get like a good idea of their play style, and then like kind of understand where they're going with their character and the backstory, stuff like that. And then I have them write the backstory, and then I kind of like say like, oh, you and you kind of match. You're kind of from the same area. Maybe you can like figure out like a way to have, if not cooperated before, at least known each other. So it's not so just kind of like getting over that first hump, that session 1 where everybody's like, okay, you're in a tavern, and like you see some other people sitting around.
Like, why the hell would you go with it? Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
it's a great way. I agree with you. I think it can be very helpful for new players to have, and that way they have someone to especially if they're a new player who isn't great at bouncing off of someone else roleplay wise, and they have that sort of other person that they can play off of. In terms of trying to get comfortable with the role play. And I think there's a lot of ways to introduce new people too. I think it's okay to have a group who is full of new players. I also think it's perfectly fine to have a new player along with experienced players who are willing to take the time to allow them to get used to it. And when questions come up, you just as much as any of the other players can sort of help field their questions. I think that's really fun. We do that a lot in our campaigns. My players know more about the D&D rules than I do. So when we have new people that they're not too sure about a rule, it's so nice to have they're my living encyclopedias. I'll just be like, I don't know, Luke. And just kind of turn his way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, like I like learning the rules, but I don't have a good memory for them, and because I've never been like a player long term,
Yeah.
I don't know like what the warlock, like all their abilities. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, you tell me.
I tell my players, do you watch any Matthew Colville stuff?
I do, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I take his mindset of like, you have your character, I don't know what your character does, you tell me. Because I know most of the rules to get this game running. I don't know all the rules, and I don't know a lot of what your character does. So you tell me you want to do something, and I say, cool, what does that do? Because I similarly have a really bad memory for stuff like that. So I'm usually just like, sure, let's look at the rule and read it, or if someone knows. Yeah,
For sure.
someone says,
Yeah, and if there's a way to get around the rules, you were talking about immersion and stuff. If there's a way to get around the rules, I will usually also go with that. I mean, there's the rule of cool, of course, but just being able to like a lot of the times I'll have, I mean, we have normal combat, but a lot of the times I'll just do role play combat. Like, look, they're gonna attack, you're gonna attack, do some stuff. This isn't necessarily gonna be like a full out combat, but it's more of a challenge to see.
Yeah.
Like, there's gonna be an objective. Like maybe they're trying to get something before they die. Something like that, where it's not, there's no initiative. It's more like are you in the right place at the right time kind of a thing.
did you ever play 4th edition?
Never.
They I don't know if you know, they had they kind of stripped it for 5e, but I feel like sometimes it sounds very similar to what you're saying. They had the I don't remember the term for it, chat may know, but they had sort of like the group challenge where everyone in the group, there's the tomb is the rock at the front of the tomb is slowly closing, or the windmill you're trying to climb up is starting to fall down, and it's a group challenge, and you would let every player, even if it's like you're saying, maybe an encounter, the goblins see you in the distance and they're about to run towards you, a fight may break out, and then you do a group challenge where you'd move from each of the players and say, tell me what you'd like to do skill wise, whether I want to jump from this thing to that thing, or I want to try and close it with this, and they would make their roll, and if the party was largely successful, then they could do stuff like you're mentioning, like, okay, well, you guys did all your successful checks, you get away from the goblins, there's no combat. That's it. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I've never played, but I've definitely stolen that. I've stolen a couple things from 4th edition.
There's some really good stuff from 4e.
Yeah, the skill challenges for one was so good, such a good idea. And they kind of have it in, I guess Pathfinder and Starfinder, where it's like the sliding scale, right? So like it goes up and down depending on your successes, but also the mobs and minions stuff from 4th edition. I use it all the time.
I need to implement more minions into my stuff. Yeah, you're right.
It's so much fun to be able to like slash through 20 goblins instead of just one.
I need to do that as well. The old 1 HP water balloons that can still hit pretty hard, but you know, you don't have to sit there. I found myself doing that as a DM. I'm like, I just want to let them kill this thing. You know, I should just let it hit. I should have let them kill it instead of having the 2 HP and wasting a whole another round of us going around. You know, the minion is a great idea for stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a really good supplement, and which combines the mob stuff from 5e and puts it with the minion stuff from 4e, and it's just like it's really good. It's really good. So.
I also like, there's some fun stuff from Matt Colville where he's taken some of the aspects of 4E and in a video or two, like translate and like, hey, this works perfectly fine for 5E too. I think it's a maligned edition, but I also think that there was a certain elegance in, like, obviously we play Magic the Gathering. There's a certain elegance in the language of Magic. Like I always tell, my girlfriend was interested in playing it months ago, and I tried telling her, and you probably know this, Chris, I said there's an elegance in the language. Like once you learn how the language works, you will understand any rule they present to you, because it literally is as it reads. And 4th edition was the same way. There's a certain elegance to it. It truly is as it reads. It was a very cohesive system that I think kind of gets overlooked because people had this idea that you couldn't role play in it, which I feel is unfounded. We played a game in 4th edition and you could certainly role play in it. I just think that people felt like, I guess they needed more of that written content to sort of affirm they almost needed like consent to role play from the books, and the books just didn't really satisfy that. So maybe that's why they felt like that edition didn't work. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I read through a lot of it, and I feel like it's pretty much the same. Like any system you could roleplay in, and just got to set it up right.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel the same way as you do, and that's one of the big things that I really enjoyed when I initially played in that campaign that was offline some years ago before I started to decide to become a DM, was that level of immersion. I specifically remember our mission. We were sort of like, I was joining in the game very late, but they're like, we're happy to have you, because that's the same people I was telling you about that were having fun out in the living room table while I was in my room being sitting in my little cave, not coming out. And I finally said, you know what, I'll just do it. And so I joined late, but they were going on like a covert mission, and they had to get on a boat, and this was like an actual, the tech, it was Dungeons and Dragons, but the tech was more advanced. So it was like an actual like gas powered boat that was going to take us across the waters to get us where we needed to go. And I remember it being so interesting because our dungeon master was like, okay, you've been given your briefing on what your mission is. Here's the boat that you're going to use to get to the secret island to do whatever you need to do. And as we all loaded up into the boat, my thinking of how the game worked would be, he would just be like, okay, all of your characters go to the island. And instead, he kind of did what you did, Chris, where he was very hands off, and he said, okay, what happens now? And we were like, well, we go to the island. And he goes, well, how do you pilot the boat? And it was so engaging in a way to be like, wow, this is a world that isn't going to move on its own. I have to, just like in real life, I have to be engaged with it. So it made me start to kind of pull out my character sheet and look through and be like, what would this is a living, breathing world. What would my character use to be able to figure out how to start a boat? And I'm like, even in my real life, I'm not really sure all of the intricacies of how to, pilot a boat. So it's kind of fun and really engaging because the DM was sort of like, kind of what you're saying, very hands off, and just was like, you figure it out. You have a character with these abilities, and you can do it. And that was very engaging to me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you leave it to the players to figure out how it goes and kind of help you world build a little bit, or at least tell the story.
Do you have a lot of do you have players who try to help craft? So I guess I should go back. Your main campaign world, you said that's set in, what is it called? The Dreadlands?
Ravenloft. Yeah,
Ravenloft. Okay. Do they have sort of like an active hand in sort of crafting some of that world, or do you sort of like play off of largely established kind of areas and stuff from the books for your campaigns?
So for this one, I really loved Curse of Strahd. If you, just a recommendation, if nobody's played it
I
and they're
haven't
going to
even
play a
played it yet.
module, yeah, if you're gonna play a module, play Curse of Strahd. This is the only good one, in my opinion. It does need it does need tweaking um, to make it better, but I've looked at all the others. I've played a couple of the others. They're just, yeah, like it depends on your kind of game. But if you're looking for like real story, Curse of Strahd is where it's at. It's so good, and then I loved it so much. I love the horror genre anyway. So like, yeah, it
Same.
was interesting to. The thing with the books, the new book, is it doesn't really dive very deep. It kind of gives you just a general overview of each domain, which can kind of be frustrating. But in my case, like, yeah, it made it easy to make a story there. I took what they gave me, and we still it's a continuous thing. So if they have another idea, I'll try and throw it in somehow,
Hmm.
and it'll change the story a bit. But they're pretty much all of my groups are pretty much hands off, except for I'm building a campaign now for later in the year, and the two of the players are writers, like actual
Oh,
authors,
can
and
you?
they're super intent on what was that?
They're super intent on having a hand in the world bidding of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Oh,
different for
awesome,
me, but
awesome.
also at the same time, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
Do you do you want to? Is this going to be set in another established setting, or is this like a homebrew thing that you're coming up with here?
This is all, yeah, completely homebrew.
Oh, sweet. Can you tease any of it? Sort of like what the basic premise of it may be.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like post-apocalyptic if the world was only ever got to a fantasy level. So it's kind of like it's not like technology disappeared. It's a fantasy world that went post-apocalyptic a bit. It's very limited. It's a very much a survival game, kind of like like Ark or something like that, where you have to get resources and stuff like that.
Have you
But it's also
have you
horror
checked have you checked out
primarily.
Dark Sun content?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
That's It seems like it'd be a great kind of inspiration. Maybe some stuff from that would help maybe inspire some elements to it.
Yeah, it's we definitely taken some stuff from there, but yeah, it's just pretty fun. The ideas we're coming up with, a couple of new mechanics, stuff like that.
That's really awesome. I know I find myself I started to do we had our main I do a homebrew. All of our games are connected in a homebrew plane. So there's a story thread that is always sort of like I guess that's part of the fun of it is when you do like connected campaigns or sessions that you can kind of do these fun breadcrumb trails and kind of tie plot threads together and stuff like that. And I found myself we did the main campaign and ended that, and I started doing these spin-off. I guess you'd call them shorter campaigns. I don't know. Some people may not agree with that, but like 20-ish sessions for each one, and each of them I found myself trying to make each of them very different from one another, and it's been very engaging. I don't know. Have you ever tried to do that? Like I'm gonna do this either one shot or a shorter campaign where I really try to make it something to like. For example, I know us talking about the role play and immersion aspect, I did one of them was called Devils in the Details, and they're kind of based off of like the four main factions of our world, if you will, like a
Okay.
consortium of different groups and peoples. And this one was a very role play heavy. The players were trying to sort of gain the most money by the end of the campaign, so it was role play heavy, and there was like some light PvP because they weren't fighting each other, but they were sort of like placing bets against one another and trying to beat each other out, monetarily. Have you ever tried to maybe add some fun, kind of interesting mechanics like that into some of your games?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think now. We had one where, yeah, I basically switched up. Well, the first introduction was the skill challenges, so I made almost everything a skill challenge rather than just like a pass fail, and it was interesting. It took a long time to play, but that wasn't streamed, so that's
Mhm.
why I was able to do that For the other stuff, yeah, I tend to take out a lot of the stuff I've come up with for the stream, just because there's a reason it's like that. It moves the game along much faster. Um, but
Yeah, for sure.
for the new one we do for this new campaign coming up, yeah, the whole economy is homebrewed. So like the economy of like what's that called, the action economy, as well as the like actual economy, like financial in the game.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Does that mean you're sort of like running combat a little differently?
The combat will pretty much be the same. It's just so it is, we'll just say it's low magic. We'll just say that. But there are ways that we've kind of like made it so you can use magic. It's just extremely dangerous and costs a lot.
Oh, I like that. I like that aspect. That adds sort of what we're talking about, that sort of level of danger that is kind of more fun than the standard, out of the box D&D that I find interesting.
Yeah, I mean it has to do with the theme, right, of the game. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Worry Warlord says, "What is your prep versus improv ratio?"
That depends on the group.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I guess that would probably depend on the group and the game too, right?
Yeah, it does. Like, okay, well, that also depends on the stream. Like, if I'm doing like just a normal game, I'll usually prep quite a lot. Maybe like, 3 to 4 hours for every hour of gameplay. Like, I always want to know what they might do and be able to kind of at least have a general idea of it.
Yeah.
But for other games, sometimes the players just kind of like, for example, for the one that we're streaming now, like a lot of it, they'll just be like, okay, we're gonna try this. I'm like, okay, I guess we're just gonna improv this whole area. Because...
I had all these notes, but I guess I'll just push these off the table. We'll go do this thing.
Exact percentage. I would say I like to prep as much as I can. I like to build the world out as much as I can. So
yeah,
I know I don't have events necessarily. It depends really on what they do. I have characters in certain places, and if they go to those places, they'll encounter them. But I don't like to plan events all the time. Sometimes like they there's actions have reactions or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Cause and effect. So if they do something, then of course I'm going to plan something because of that. But yeah, I've learned to try to just plan the world, and things are happening, and then whatever they encounter, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
I kind of fall into the same boat. I sort of disbelieve in the adage that you can take too many notes. I actually don't really agree with that. I think you can take as many notes as you want, because you can always cut down. It's difficult to build up if you have nothing to go off of. And I think, as we were both agreeing, I think that does depend both on your players and your game. And most of our Friday games, I've been very lucky and humbled to have a group of friends who I didn't meet the people that are on our Friday streams. Like I didn't meet them online to try and get them to come play D&D. Like they are just my friends who, it's very much sort of like, I think we have a lot of stream stuff, that I try to position for who watch it to make it interesting, but it is still very much sort of like a home game. I want my players to feel like they're playing a home game just with some cameras turned on for anybody else who'd want to watch it. But I still try to make it entertaining, and part of that I think is, man, what were we just? What was our topic? What were we just talking about? Lost my place.
How much prep?
Prep, yes. I'm lucky to have a group of people who are kind of okay. It's sort of the player buy-in. My player group is very okay with, like, we want there to be kind of what we were saying before. They're okay with a very narrative-driven, almost cinematic experience, even if that means it is a slightly on rails experience. So, at least for most of my games, I tend to write a lot of notes, and that's kind of to be like, this is where I want to try and get the players. It's kind of one of those models of like, they can do many things along the way, but I'd like for it to sort of be headed towards, that common goal at the end of the day, with some amount of variation. And that's been the case for a lot of campaigns. The next one I know that we're doing is called Lucent Odyssey, and that's going to be a very different experience for me, and I'm very excited for it because it's going to be another homebrew campaign set in our world, but this one is going to be like a open-ended, like hex crawl adventure that's going to essentially be just like Oregon Trail style. Like here's your map, here's your draft animals, here's your wagon, get from this point of the map to that point of the map. And then I can kind of do what, like you were saying before, Chris, where I can just sort of take a step back and be like, it is on your shoulders now, the responsibility, and I will step in when I think it's helpful to move things along, but otherwise I can kind of just let them take the wheel, and that's really exciting and fun. It's just, I guess, a little different in the way that you have to prep for something like that, because when you have sort of like a hex crawl map, I've found you have to you have to know what all the areas are already, you know. So that's right. Kind of been tough to set it all up. Have you had games like that before where you've had to do a ton of prep beforehand, or do you just kind of try and go like session by session?
No, so yeah, back to, I mean, it's kind of the same thing we just said. Like I do prep like the world as much as I can, and like what they, where they might go. But of course there's a story too, like, and I found that most players, even experienced ones, they do kind of want to be told what to do next. Like I've experimented with just completely open world, where the players are just like, I have no idea what my motivation is right now. So like, yeah, you say it's like on rails. I feel like it's more like almost every game should be on rails just a little bit, but
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but it's more like, you know, it's a subway station. It's
yes.
Like a subway. You can choose which one you're gonna go to, but it's already kind of set what's gonna happen when
That's
you get
actually
there.
a really good way to explain it. I really like that analogy. You're right. I agree with you. I think, especially for us streamers, to tell an engaging story, and that, you know, probably I don't at me, anybody, but I think that's probably one of my criticisms of like the second season of Critical Role's campaign, is there was that sort of midsection where they got into their boat and got to sail around, and it kind of felt a little meandering there for a little while, and I'm sure the players had fun, which I love, but yeah, I think being able to say, hey, let's find out where we're going here instead of the complete open-ended sandbox nature, I think that works, especially for stream games. But I think if you have players who allow you to sort of be like, yeah, we kind of want the objective for you to tell us to do it, that is like the bread and butter for me. I love when a player tells me that, because then it's like, okay, cool, we can continue to weave this really fun story without it just going completely nowhere for however many sessions, you know.
Yeah, no, I felt the same a little bit about that, and I agree.
Yeah. I there's a lot of stuff about Matt's games that I really enjoy, and I've been really digging their newest kind of spin-off tale with Brennan. That's been super fun to watch. He's always very charismatic, and that's been really cool to check out. And very similar, kind of that story that and that's an interesting thing too, the idea of like a prequel series, where even more so than a normal D&D campaign, you kind of have like this kind of there's gonna be an apocalyptic event. So hopefully everyone is on board with kind of allowing that to happen, because this is the history of the world, but what you do in between here and there is up to you. So that's kind of cool to watch that. It's kind of like, you know, the disaster is coming. It's just how it plays out that's kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, honestly, like, I think that's it, is like just the middle section is like, you have to have just enough. Like, it's a really hard balance. It can be, and that's the reason I don't like modules, is because they're too, like, especially like, I don't know if you've ever played like Starfinder or Pathfinder modules. They are very much like, go here, do this. There's like, you can role play, but like, what's the point? Because it's not going to change anything. This is what's happening. I've heard
Pathfinder Starfinder is really great because it's although it's slightly crunchier, it offers more options to sort of you defining who your character is in the game. But I've always been interested to hear maybe some of the criticisms to it. That's kind of interesting. I haven't heard about that.
Well, this is just for their adventure paths, right? They're pre-written modules. Like if you're
Okay,
homebrewing,
okay.
it's like anything. But I'm just
Oh,
saying,
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
like D&D 5e, at least their modules like do a little bit better job of saying like, here's all the places you could possibly go check it out. Where Pathfinder is like, the next step is this, do this. So, yeah. As for the character creation, I saw a question. What do you think of character alignment and why it should be cut from 6e?
Oh, that's a good question, Warlord. Well, I don't know. Chris, is there any rules that you can think of? Because I don't know that I can think of any. Are there any rules? I do feel like alignment is sort of... It's a weird conversation because I know for myself, I feel like it's important for the narrative, but I also don't feel like it needs to be like a stat. You know, everyone's characters are going to have an alignment in their minds, and that may be fluid. It may change over the course of their character growth or character arc. But my only point of contention with fully getting rid of it is I wonder if there's any mechanics left in 5e where it still calls out to a specific alignment. I don't know if there is or not. I don't remember. But that would be kind of hard.
Mechanics-wise, yeah, I think there's a couple of magic items that like people can't use because of their alignment.
Yeah, and isn't like detect good and evil, is that alignment based or is that just sort of like creature based or something?
I think it is alignment based.
Okay. That would be my only point of contention is I wonder how you'd handle that transition for that stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
I think for me, I feel like it's a good starting thing to have.
Yeah.
Alignment kind of tells you where the character is at in their space, in their mind space, like you know, if they've had some trouble or whatever. But I think it's like with it, like anything, like it's kind of fluid. Like it really depends on the perspective, and people aren't so black and white. Like it could be like they could be kind of like harsh and, you know, evil or conservative or whatever on one topic, and then on another topic they're completely the opposite. So I feel like it's a good starting place to define the character, but that can change, and that's kind of the important thing for me is like all the characters have some sort of arc. Like there should be a defining moment or arc that happens within their story, and they should all change eventually.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think D&D just as a game across the board I think the narrative has evolved. I think obviously it started out as a war game, largely probably combat focused, but then it evolved to have more of a narrative. But I think even then, at least my read of it is it felt very much still sort of the, you know, chivalrous knight saves girl from evil dragon, you know, and it was very black and white. Whereas I think the game has evolved as just kind of culture has evolved to understand and bring in a little more nuance to things. And I would agree with you, Chris. You know, what alignment do you give the you know, kid who is stealing stuff, but that's also because he's stealing stuff to live, because, you know, he's poor in a kingdom that, you know, is sort of like the Robin Hood where the rich are hoarding all the wealth. So it kind of gets into that gray zone. And I guess for me, I would say I agree with Chris. I think alignment is important to sort of have that baseline of where you're starting off with your character, what their history is up until that point, beginning into the campaign. But from there, I don't know that it matters so much for the game specifically, other than your own character growth. And to me, I feel like it's not a huge factor into the game because who cares if your character alignment changes? You know, I feel as though what would be, you know, you'd make your good character finally do a really terrible act because maybe that's part of the narrative, or maybe that's where you want to take your character. And the DM finally says, you know what, with that, I'm going to say that your alignment is now, you know, chaotic neutral, or maybe even neutral evil or something. Okay. Well, who cares?
I still think I think there's a place for an idea of that nature still, because like you make a good point, like different tribes or different factions will have different ideas of what's good and evil, but at the same time, not really. I mean, I get the argument, like, yeah, two enemies are going to be like, okay, kill those guys, they're bad. But like, if you're actually a good person, you wouldn't be like, okay, let's just kill everybody on that side. Like a good person would be like, no, let's like try to figure this out. Let's try to work together somehow, even with orcs or whatever, you know, or whatever it may be. Like if you're an
Yeah.
actually good person, you'll try to figure some way to work together without like resorting to violence or killing or whatever. It doesn't mean you have to be weak. You can still be strong and be that person. You know what I mean? So like fiends, for example, they're going to be evil. They don't even care about each other. They're going to like do whatever. They're like Machiavellian. They're going to just do whatever they can to get to the place they want to be. Like they will kill anybody. They will sacrifice anybody. They will literally do whatever it takes. So for me, like they're always going to be evil. Like you might be able to change a fiend's mind, but then are they a fiend any longer? Like at that point, you know what I mean?
I've been having this back and forth in my mind with some of this stuff because I feel as though I come from that perspective of I think there are some species out there that have and maybe it's either ingrained in their nature or maybe it's cultural, but they lean largely to, and that's not to say that there's not outliers, because I think there should be outliers in any culture or species, but I think I've had it of the mind that it's okay to say that this particular group or species is largely this alignment in most situations. But it's also been interesting hearing a lot of the, I guess, modern discussion about species or races, whatever you want to call it. You know, there's that discussion about the orcs online and stuff like that that kind of wades into deep waters. And it's been something really interesting to think about. But it's kind of, and it's been something I thought about too, like, going forward, should I say that this group is always like this? And it's kind of been something I've been racking in the back of my brain. I don't know how to fully feel about it yet. For example, you know, Spelljammer for my stuff, for example, that's the setting we play in. I don't know if you are you familiar with Spelljammer, Chris?
Yeah. We actually played a campaign, a full year of.
Oh hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the Neogi, you know, the Neogi, that is classically, as it has been written, a kind of evil slaver race that are vicious to one another. And it's interesting because I looked at the, you know, they did the new updated book that's come out that's kind of refreshed a lot of the monsters that we've had in 5th edition. And I noticed they removed a lot of that language from the Neogis, at least in terms of sort of like being slavers and stuff like that. And I'm not really sure how to feel about it. Because, yeah, I go both ways with it, where I say, you know, my immediate thought is like, well, I hate to sort of erase tradition if it's not inherently problematic. But at the same time, I wonder if it is better to maybe just allow that to be sort of something that is tailored to each DM. I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah. I agree with what Discordian said. Is like it's more about like, yeah, they should change the name of it, because like the idea of this moral thing, I don't personally believe in like a moral scale. Like people are just, or not just people, but whatever, like animals or whatever, they fall in different things. Like, you know, that's not inherently evil. This could just be like natural whatever your temperament. Like a lion is not evil because he kills other lions or deer or whatever like that. It's just the way they are. I guess it's really a structure of society. Is your society like moving forward, like uplifting, or is it like, you know, controlling and putting down everybody else? And
that's a good
what
point.
Kind of person? Yeah.
I
and
remember
in the group, here's my biggest. Sorry, I was just gonna.
No,
finish
go
with,
ahead.
like,
Sorry.
Here's the biggest problem with it. In a party, like if you're going to be in a party working together, this is the main thing for me. This is where the idea comes in. Is like, do you want a party that's always fighting? Like, do you want? It's like, because I feel like that would be really hard game to play unless it's played off as funny. It would be really hard, even in like good groups where players are constantly competing against each other. It's not fun. So for me, that's where this idea, whatever you want to call it, but evil and good comes in. Like, are your motivations aligned? And are you kind of like on the same page, or are you going to be fighting against each other the whole time?
That's a good. I remember reading an article talking about, is anyone actually altruistic, and it blew my mind. Talking about we all think we're altruistic, but it's just sort of almost done in a way to incur some sort of selfish validation for our acts. But it threw me for a loop. So, but that's a great way to put it, Discordian. And yeah, as you were saying, Chris, and then Wary Warlord, they bring up a good point. It would sort of, the perspective is very different too. You know, a certain society could say what we're doing, we value that as good, and you know, it's kind of hard to say it's kind of hard to outline like a universal good and evil. That can be kind of tough.
Yeah, I don't like those words, good and evil, but I do feel like there is an objective point of view depending on the situation. It's very complex, right? Like it depends on the environment, it depends on like what's happening in the world, like what kinds of problems you have. For the time that you're in, there's better ways to deal with things, and sometimes that requires a iron fist, and sometimes it requires like peace and love. But it should change, and people aren't very good at changing. I think that's the biggest problem. So.
Yeah, I suppose that's maybe where a little bit of my own bias comes in. I guess I sort of maybe subconsciously factor in a sliding scale of valuing individual freedom versus being like oppressive or authoritarian, you know, and maybe that's sort of in my mind how I've kind of seen good and evil, is how willing you are to subject others versus kind of allowing them the freedom to engage in what they want. But maybe that's a little me bleeding over to my own games.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we're talking about like a little bit more real world politics too. But, like, yeah, again, I don't think there's an evil and I don't think there's a good. I think there's something that's usually generally better for everybody as a society, and something that doesn't lead to a never-ending cycle of violence and non-progression.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes you need that as well. If society is too out of control, you need somebody to step in and be like, okay, we're doing it this way.
And maybe that you're right. Maybe that would be authoritarian, but maybe better for the future because of that.
Yeah, for a short term though. That's the thing, is like it needs to change eventually. And
yeah. Scordian says, yeah, it reminds him of a mirror created to duplicate an individual, but it didn't work on true neutral individuals because there weren't enough peaks to map. That's an interesting idea. Like well, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. True neutral is a very interesting alignment too. That's a real tough one to sort of like paint.
Yeah. To really not care what happens either way.
I was gonna say, what would you consider a true neutral character, Chris?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I think I read that like true neutral is sort of just like the common man. They sort of want general peace. They don't try to step on anybody else, but they also sort of tend to themselves and their own cultures and stuff like that. But that's kind of how I've thought about it. But I don't know. That's an interesting. The alignment talk is very interesting.
Yeah, and again, I don't think there's like good and evil though. But in a game, in a story, like you need an antagonist and you need like the heroes. So it's the easiest and fastest way to be like, okay, here you go. But I like to play with that. I like to be like, you know, when my players finally get to the BBEG and the BBEG's like, well, actually, I'm saving the world, and they're just like, what?
I do that. I do that too much in my games. Yeah, I feel like there's something interesting though, right? About it's fun to have a villain you can hate, right? But I think there's something more nuanced and fun about a villain who believes that what they're doing is right, even if they may not be right. And it may be more interesting sometimes, maybe they are right in some respects. I think that's always very interesting for building villains. I don't know if you get a kick out of it like I do, Chris, but I love building a villain. It's so fun and interesting.
Oh, it's my favorite part, yeah.
I guess that's probably why I obviously have not run Strahd or played in Strahd, but I could certainly see, and maybe you can answer this for me, where maybe part of the interesting part of that character is the complexity of Strahd themselves, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. The way the module has him written is that he is completely far gone, and what they would call evil. Like, he doesn't care about anything. He just wants to play with the characters, except for one thing he cares very much about, which is this basically a girl. I don't know if you want to get too much into it. I won't give any spoilers away, but like
I think that's pretty
this,
like top level, yeah.
yeah. But at this point, like he's so far gone that he just sees her as something to possess. He's obsessed with possessing her love rather than the actual.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's some other stuff, but I won't give that away just in case anybody wants to play.
Yeah,
so he's a complex character, and it was funny because like he's never been in his history. He's never been like typically what you would call good, but you know, maybe at one point he wasn't as evil. So I liked that idea and I played around with it. And one of the characters actually, in the end, like they had to sit down with Strahd, and she cast, what was it called? Ceremony.
Whoa, is that the like marriage bonding spell?
There's a couple. Yeah, hold on. Is it ceremony or is it? I think. Oh, now I'm trying to remember the spell, but it's basically. I think ceremony has multiple effects. One of them is marriage, but I think the other one is where it resets temporarily their alignment. So maybe like, you know, Strahd is being influenced by these dark powers to some extent because he's being tormented as all the Dark Lords are. But for a brief moment, I let her get away with just resetting it to maybe not neutral, but maybe less evil, and kind of clearing his mind just enough to allow them to kind of like get the upper hand.
That's actually really neat. The scoring says atonement. You touch one willing creature whose alignment has changed. Make a DC 20 Whiz insight check. On a successful check, you restore the target to its original alignment. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, that game was like 3 years ago, but
whoa,
yeah, it was so much fun.
Is that a high level
spell? I was
spell?
like, you know what? This sounds really cool. It is pretty. Like they were level 9, so
okay.
10 paladin. Anyway, yeah,
that sounds super interesting. Yeah, I like a villain like that, right? That's very clearly the antagonist of the story, but has layers or aspects that you can connect with as a not just a player, but as a person, that kind of makes them more nuanced and complex than your typical just, oh, I hate everything, I want to kill everybody, you know. Which those are fun to have too, but sometimes it's more interesting to have a little more layered villain. Are there more? So you said Dark Lords. Are there more Dark Lords in the worlds of Ravenloft?
Yeah. So the whole idea of Ravenloft is that there's these things called dark powers, which nobody knows what they are, and they kind of leave that open on purpose for the DM to kind of interpret. But they trap evil people within, it's like a pocket of the Shadowfell. So Ravenloft is basically untouchable, but they trap them by their own desires. So Strahd, yeah, he was so jealous of this girl, of his brother actually, that he killed him. And then the dark powers are like, okay, so you're gonna be stuck here forever now, always pining after this girl who is dead. But all the Dark Lords are like that. They've done something so like atrocious that the dark powers brought them into the world, stuck them there forever to be tormented forever.
Oh man, that's pretty awesome. I need to play. I know the Curse of Strahd is obviously a big one. Do you know any other adventures that are set in like the Raven? Do we have any 5e content that's built around the Ravenloft setting but isn't necessarily Strahd oriented?
So we just have Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft now, which is they do a general overview of all the different the domains and the Dark Lords there, but they don't have any story stuff. So that's what I'm working with too. And honestly, I go back and I look at the first edition, second edition stuff, because it's what you were saying earlier, how they changed the language about Spelljammer and stuff like that. I also don't agree so much with them doing that. I understand what they're trying to go for, but the thing is, certain things existed at one point, and it's stuff that we all pretty much object to now, like slavery. And I think it's important to be able to say like, hey, you're gonna go fight something so that we find so abhorrent right now, you know. And I feel like there needs to be like some extreme examples. Shouldn't just be like, oh, they're kind of bad.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I feel that way as well, where I feel like sometimes when I say we, I don't mean necessarily like me and you, but I just say sometimes as a society we tend to make the wrong assumption that because we have a certain element in our stories that means we condone it in any way, which isn't the case. You know, you can have characters who are, you know, any number of things, or cultures who are inherently bad, or any number of things that you don't condone as a person, but are there to shed a light on that and to fight against that. I think is important. And I think pushing that away sort of diminishes a little bit of maybe what the players are fighting against, or just the general mood of the campaign. So yeah, I find myself in agreement.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, like I like the changes in general, what they've done with like Tasha's and stuff, and being able to create your own character any way you want. I think that's fine, but there's some things like themes and stuff like that, and some of the lore that like it doesn't need to be changed. Like, yeah, at the time, I mean, it was they're the characters, the evil people that you're trying to fight. Yeah, they're racist. They're horrible people. Like, that's the point. Like, we don't need to change that necessarily.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too, is that also doesn't assume that there aren't outliers within a society. I think a lot of times it may be fun to sort of take that character or creature from maybe a certain type of bad culture and to flip it on its head, to show that even with the broad generalization, there are still always stereotypes or tropes that are being broken, and to never always assume that this is always the case, which kind of, you know, relates to our real world in many ways, to never sort of hold assumptions about a particular species and stuff, despite what you may have been told, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I find the same way. Did they like, what kind of changes did they make in the Ravenloft stuff that are different from the like legacy version?
Yeah, so I haven't compared all of them. One example though is like one of the main characters used to be called the Gentleman Caller, and he was kind of like, yeah, he's some sort of fiend or whatever that goes around, and he's the main character in our game. Before though, he was much more salacious. Is that what you would call it?
Was he more of a ladies' man? Is that what they were getting at?
Yeah, ladies' man, but also like a little bit, you know, like yeah. Now they just call him the Caller, and like they're very vague on like the acts that he's performed and stuff like that. And they took out a huge chunk of like some of the best lore that has ever existed. So I put it back in, and in a different way. But it's just like small things like that. Like, do you really need to go changing that? Like, he's a demon, like, or at least he's like related to them. Like,
yeah.
Why does he have to be like slightly good or something, or like up for interpretation? Like, he's just bad. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it feels like it's sort of making material lukewarm and removing some of the character of it. Yeah, I agree.
Lady Grimm. Yes. How's it going?
Carney's head is floating. What is up, Lady Grimm? Yes. He's on my TV here at the God Mode station, our high production facility here, not my not my small computer room with green screen behind me. That's funny. Brain says, yeah, my GM likes to throw illithids at us. We're currently working with one of them who's wise enough to consider that a hexamal style threat, which is one of our evil characters from our campaign, is bad enough news to engage in some enlightened self-interest. So basically the enemy of my enemy. Yeah, there you go. That's the fun part, is you can take broad generalizations and then show the players or their characters that, hey, don't always paint with one brush, because there may be outliers. Or maybe that this is not the case at all, and this is just the way it's been portrayed by society at large. But maybe they're largely good, or, you know, however you want to deem that. You know, I know we were talking about maybe not the good and evil thing, but something like that.
Yeah, Manolithids are like the perfect example, I think, of what Weary Warlord is kind of getting at, which is that, I mean, they eat brains. That's their thing. Like, they're not evil because they eat brains. But that's what they do. Like, if they want to live, they have to eat brains. So like, but then again, do you want your brain eaten? And it's like, as your society, like, they they also do other things, right? Like they turn you into slaves and they do all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
at which point does it become like, okay, that's natural and that is a little bit evil? Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, that's where you may be like, all right, maybe I see this
If they
person
want
with
to
their brain
enslave your
missing.
entire society and turn them into mindless drones, but that's
May-
not evil. That's just
Maybe we just
nature.
want to tweak that down just a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Polishes her mind flayer's skull and cackles maniacally. Yeah, that's Discordian was talking about one of my villains from the previous campaign, right? I almost do it maybe too much. Maybe I need to give my players a break and throw just more sort of slightly more one-note villains at them. But I always love me a villain who, is sometimes trying to go things either what they believe is the right way and they're wrong, or perhaps they're doing the right thing but going about it in the wrong way. That creates that confrontation.
Yeah. I like turning I like turning the good guys, the party into the bad guys. Not because they did something bad, well, evil or whatever you want to call it, but because their actions, good intentions. Um, and if I don't know if anybody in the chat has read any of Brandon Sanderson's books, but they're amazing. He's amazing at doing that specific thing, especially in Mistborn, which is more of a junior, I guess, a young RPG, or what is it, a young adult? Young adult? I can't even
Yeah.
think of the word.
YA, yeah, young adult.
YA, a little bit. It's still mature, but his new series, of course, like Way of King, what the Stormlight Chronicles Archives. There we go, Stormlight Archives. The whole series is like a good depiction of that. Like everybody thinks they're the right person, they're doing the right thing. Stormlight Archive. Thank you, man. Living in Taiwan is really hard to keep English skill up. It's really, really hard. I always forget words.
Did you move over there after being born someone else?
No, I mean I moved over here a while ago. It's been 13 years now.
Okay.
So that's why. But I lived in the States my
Cool.
whole life.
Oh, and awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for the follow, Lady Grim. Yeah, I do that too. I got it. Sometimes I try and curtail that because I love a good story where the characters finish and they're just like, they turn to each other and they're like, are we the baddies?
Yeah.
You got to be careful as a DM maybe not to overplay that too many times, but it is kind of fun to make the players sort of like almost kind of what we're talking about, where they see the world through a very sort of black and white lens, and maybe there's a little bit more to it than that. And trying to kind of maybe open their eyes as players can be kind of fun to make them so, oh wow, we did this thinking this was a good thing, but maybe there are side effects to this that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah. Exactly.
Rain says, I don't personally like Skybreakers, but I can see where you're going with that.
Oh yeah, I don't read any of his YA stuff. I mean, Mistborn is supposed to be an adult one, like a normal, mature fantasy, but it is a little bit like the themes. But it's not. I don't read any of his other YA stuff, like his superhero series or Skybreakers or any of that.
And then Lady Grimm says, unpopular opinion, to some extent, good and evil are societal constructs. Granted, there is often found a code of conduct that overlaps to some extent or another. But overall, societal constructs. If you're taught from birth that eating brains is your only chance of survival, you and those, including that upbringing, are not going to deem it as evil. It's true. I guess, yeah. That's kind of what we were talking about before, Lady Grimm. It can be, the world is a big, complex thing, and to try and break things down into simple binary, left or right or black or white, good or evil, can sometimes paint things a little too easily. That's why I am happy for anyone who loves stuff like Disney movies and stuff, but I think sometimes there's something a little more fun in a story that's a little more nuanced and complex, because then it kind of reminds me a little bit of the actual world, where things are not, we both live, well, that's obviously a very different culture where you're at, Chris, but I know, just obviously being here in the States, there's a lot of talk between me and friends and stuff like that about just ethical consumption in a capitalist society, and it's just like you could it's like an impossible to hit 100% efficiency, because if you were to really try and be that good person who doesn't want to be involved in any of that, you'd have to live in a hut, in the middle of nowhere, no electricity, because all these companies and stuff, these corporations, it's so hard to remove yourself from that stuff.
Yeah. Again, like I was said already, we don't have to say it again. It was just it's a very complex thing. But I guess the big takeaway is: are you knowingly, with like knowledge of what you're doing, being malicious first of all toward anything, and then second, are you knowingly making something worse for somebody or something else on purpose?
Yeah, that's actually really
Not like as a byproduct of what you're doing, like to survive or whatever. Like, yeah, sometimes you have to do things to survive, but are you making it as painful as possible for somebody on purpose? And if they're doing that, then I would say that's probably not a good thing, because you're not helping society in any way. You're not helping anything in any way if you're doing that.
I would agree. That is a great way to put it. Lady Grimm says yes, intent. That's very true. Yes. Well, man, that was super fun. When's your next stream?
Next stream is next Tuesday morning for you guys. Right. Continuing our Inquisition. Speaking of lawful evil.
Oh, yeah. What's that about? Give us a little rundown about that one.
Oh, it's the so this
the Inquisition. Duh.
It is the Inquisition. Yeah, it's basically like, the whole premise is that there's one church, the true church, but there are so many different orders, and what they believe is all different, but they all believe they're the different order for the true church, of course, and they're all rivals, and they'll do anything to get their faction in place, just like real life. So right now they are chasing down an actual miracle worker to try and stop her from existing, so that their candidate is chosen instead of trying to help the world.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds really interesting, actually. And that's like, is that set in the modern world or like in a D&D world?
It's a D&D world. It's actually set in Eberron, but it's not really important to the story.
Hey, Eberron is an awesome place. I really love that setting too. Yeah. Well, man, that was super fun to chat with you, Chris. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It was good times.
I want to make sure everybody in the chat, first of all, thank everyone who followed the channel and supported. For those who are in my community, as I've said before, please go check out Chris over at Carnisideshow. He does an amazing job. We've been, I guess, internet buddies or accomplices for a while now. I got to go play on one of his games. I think I was just looking at it the other day. I think it was like a full year ago that I played with you. And I was like, I could have sworn that was like 3 months ago. It still feels fresh and fun. I would love to pop on at any point in the future if you're ever looking for an empty seat. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our one shots tend to be ridiculous, so
that was a lot of fun. It was really cool to play with you and some of the other guests. So yes, go make sure and follow Carnisideshow. They do a fantastic job. I love all their content. It's always goofy and fun. And a good time to watch for sure. And before we go, I was gonna say I like to try and take the audience here, since this is D&D related, and try and go raid someone else. Is there anyone, I can pull up some people on mine. Is there anybody on your radar, Chris, that may be streaming right now that you'd like to go and try and raid, that may be live?
D&D related, or
yeah, or just TTRPG, or in the wheelhouse of what we do.
Well, so one of our players, and also somebody you may recognize from Deerstalker Productions. I don't know if you've seen
I've seen them before, yeah.
He plays Antrius, the bard, the really annoying one. They also play D&D, but right now he has his personal channel, and they're doing he's doing forge stuff, metal making for
whoa. I mean, that could definitely be considered D&D. What's their handle?
So Forgeling.
Okay, and is that Forgeling like Forgeling?
That's right. Yep, that's him.
All right, I just try to spell, man. That's me. Let me see. Let me go ahead and before we bring and draw this to a close, is there anything else you wanted to shout out, Chris, before I draw things to a close?
No, I think that's it. That's pretty good.
Right, sick. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Anyone else out there, if you're interested in my channel, again, thank you so much for the follow. You can go follow my links here. Go check me out over on Twitter. I do announcements over there. I got a Patreon that gives you kind of behind the scenes content for our D&D stuff here. We're in between campaigns. Our next one coming up is called Lucent Odyssey. It is a open-ended hex crawl adventure that is going to be set in a sort of Oregon Trail style game where the players are going to be asked to go from one side of a map to the other. It should be a lot of fun. You can expect that July-ish. Like I said, I'm in between trying to get some of the production stuff ready for that, some commission art and things like that ready to roll for that. So make sure and check that out. But yeah, I'm also trying to do some professional DM stuff. So if you are looking to have a consistent DM to maybe run a game for you, either on Tuesday or Thursday evening around 8 p.m. EST, and those times can be a little flexible depending on, you know, whomever I can get into the game. Please go check that out. I'm running a Spelljammer themed game that is set in our homebrew worlds that you see on the stream here, either through the VODs or through our YouTube. So make sure and please go check that out. If you know anybody who may be interested, that would be interested in that, please, I'd love to have them. I got 4 seats filled, which means I can get the Tuesday night's game ready to roll. So it's going to be running this next Tuesday, but there's still 2 more seats that you can join in for that for session 0. And then Thursday has all the seats open. So make sure to go check that content out. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining me. I had a ton of fun. I'm going to go send everyone over to Forgeling, and so we can go check out their content. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with me. Thank you. I know it's so early morning. You're a boss for doing it. I'd be like, you'd have me on your stream and I'd just be like half asleep trying to slap myself, you know, drink a gallon of coffee or something like that. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.
All right, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. Make sure to stay hydrated. Stretch your legs every once in a while. Stay happy, healthy, and safe, because I want to see you next stream. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time for some party community games to kind of just engage with the community with. So if you have the time and want to come play some stuff like Jackbox or use your words and things like that while we're kind of getting some stuff ready for our next D&D game, make sure and join me then. Good night, everybody!
What do you guys think happened?
One of the players Robbie played with got carried away and killed him.
Well, that's kind of far out.
Mazes and Monsters is a far-out game. Swords, poison, spells, battles, maiming, killing.
Hey, it's all imagination.
Is it?